Shalom, good evening. This is TV7 Israel News broadcast to you from Jerusalem. And in today's top stories, the IDF advances with preparations for its looming ground operation into the Gazan border town of Rafah. Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant asserts that Israel is engaged in a war versus 7 militaries and terror organizations throughout the greater Middle East. The U.S. Senate votes overwhelmingly in support of a foreign aid package for Israel, the Palestinians, Ukraine, and Taiwan, while the Islamic Republic resumes attacks against U.S. service members in Iraq. The IDF is preparing for a ground operation into the Gazan border town of Rafah that will initially include a large-scale evacuation of the civilian population. More than 1 million Palestinians in Rafah will have to move to shelters that have been erected by Israel in the last few months in the southern and central Gaza Strip. The prevailing assessment is that the evacuation will take between 4 to 5 weeks. The IDF's progress in the operation will be in stages and divided into defined areas. The plan has been presented to the United States and to partner nations throughout the region. And while the IDF prepares for its Rafah operation, in tandem, it also continues to operate against terror targets throughout the Gaza Strip. According to the IDF spokesperson's unit, Israel Air Force aircraft attacked over 50 Hamas terror targets over the course of the past 24 hours alone. Moreover, combat jets destroyed 2 launching sites that were established inside designated humanitarian areas in the southern Gaza Strip, and IDF troops also eliminated a couple dozen terror operatives and destroyed terror infrastructure in the corridor in the central Gaza Strip. Meanwhile, amid publicly acknowledged considerations by U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken on slapping an IDF battalion with sanctions over alleged human rights abuses, Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant visited the Netzach Yehuda battalion in question as it operates in the city of Beit Hanun, which is situated on the northeastern edge of the Gaza Strip, less than 4 miles away from the Israeli town of Sderot.
קודם כל, באתי לומר לכם חג שמח, חג פסח שמח, ולהגיד לכם שמערכת הביטחון כולה, צה"ל וגם מדינת ישראל, תומכים בכם, מעריכים אתכם ומחזקים אתכם בפעולה שלכם לשמור על מדינת ישראל, ואתם ספציפית לשמור על סדרות. המקום שאתם נמצאים בו בבית חנון זה לשמור על העיר סדרות מפני פיגוע, פשיטה וכמובן ירי טילים. הגדוד נכנס בצורה טובה מאוד לפעילות, ואנחנו מקבלים את הפידבק הזה, וזה מגיע עד אליי, וחשוב לי שתדעו את זה. ואני רוצה לומר לכם עוד משהו שבא על הרקע של זה שעליתם לכותרות. שגיאות ותקלות קורות בכל מקום שיש בו פעילות צבאית, ואסור שיקרו. בוודאי לא דברים שקשורים לעניינים נורמטיביים שאסור לנהוג בהם. אבל זה שחייל אחד או שניים או חיילים עשו משהו לא נכון, זה לא מטיל דופי בגדוד. הגדוד הוא מסגרת לוחמת שעושה את העבודה שלה ברמה גבוהה מאוד.
Jerusalem's top defense official went on to assert that no one has the right to lecture Israel on morals and values as it maintains the highest standards on both accounts.
אם יש מישהו שקורא איתו משהו, אנחנו מטפלים בו. אני מתכוון לצבא הגנה לישראל וכל המערכת. זאת אומרת, אם חלילה חייל נפצע, אנחנו מחלצים אותו ומביאים אותו לבית חולים. ואם חייל מצטיין, אנחנו נותנים לו תפיחה על השכם. ואם חייל עושה שגיאה, אנחנו שופטים אותו. זה התפקיד של המערכת הצבאית. אף אחד לא ילמד אותנו בעולם מה זה מוסר ומה זה נורמות. אנחנו נדע לסדר את הנורמות, נדע להתנהג איפה שצריך, ונזכור שהמשימה שלנו זה להגן על מדינת ישראל. אנחנו נלחמים נגד 7 צבאות, או 7 ארגוני טרור, בעת הזאת, בעזה, בלבנון, בסוריה, ביהודה ושומרון, בעיראק, בתימן וגם באיראן. חלק זה צבאות וחלק ארגוני טרור. אנחנו נלחמים נגד כולם ואנחנו עומדים בפרץ, באמצעות כל הכוחות שלנו. ואנחנו נעשה כל מה שנדרש על מנת להגן על אזרחי המדינה הזאת.
It is important to highlight a report by NGO Monitor, which closely monitors non-governmental organizations which promote politically and ideologically motivated anti-Israel agendas, that an NGO named Dawn has been acting recently with the aim of pressuring the Biden administration to impose sanctions on Israeli military personnel and units in the IDF. Per NGO Monitor, shortly after the October 7th massacre by Hamas, the Dawn organization filed a private complaint with the State Department against the IDF's Netzach Yehuda battalion and its commanders. Nevertheless, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, during a press briefing, insisted that state has its own procedures within the department that are looking at alleged violations of international humanitarian law, rights abuses, and more.
From day one, we've been working to do everything we can to try to increase protection for civilians, as well as, to facilitate the delivery of humanitarian assistance for the Gazans who so desperately need it. When it comes to allegations of incidents of whether it's violations of international humanitarian law, rights abuses, you name it, we have processes within the department that are looking at incidents that have been raised.
Meanwhile, at the U.S. Senate, overwhelming bipartisan support included a vote in favor of sending billions of dollars worth of military support to Israel, Ukraine, and Taiwan, as well as humanitarian support for the Palestinians. The Senate's majority and minority leaders labeled the successful adoption of the amendment as an essential message of U.S. leadership to both America's allies as well as adversaries.
Mr. President, today, the Senate sends a unified message to the entire world. America will always defend democracy in its hour of need. We tell our allies, we will stand with you. We tell our adversaries, don't mess with us. We tell the world, we will do everything to defend democracy and our way of life. In a resounding bipartisan vote, the relentless work of 6 long months has paid off. Congress is sending the supplemental to President Biden's desk. Getting this done was one of the greatest achievements the Senate has faced in years, perhaps decades. A lot of people inside and outside the Congress wanted this package to fail. But today, those in Congress who stand on the side of democracy are winning the day.
When Putin escalated his war against Ukraine, I told our colleagues that allies and adversaries alike would pay very close attention to America's response. When Iran-backed terrorists invaded the Jewish state on October 7th to slaughter innocent Israelis, I warned that the world would watch closely for signs that American leadership was actually weakening. For months, our friends have watched to see whether America still had the strength that won the Cold War or the resolve that has underpinned peace and prosperity literally for decades. Our enemies have tested whether the arsenal of democracy is, in fact, built to endure. Well, tonight, the Senate will send a clear message.
It is important to highlight that alongside the adopted foreign aid package, which President Joe Biden pledged to sign into law today, the amendment also includes 3 incorporated bills which effectively slap Iran's Ayatollah regime with a fresh list of sanctions, including the Massa Act, which directly targets the Islamic Republic's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, his office, its appointees, and anyone affiliated with its work. The Massa Act also requires the U.S. President to report to Congress every single year whether those targeted Iranian officials should remain under existing sanctions, effectively rendering it much harder for the current as well as future administrations to unilaterally lift sanctions from the Islamic Republic of Iran. Meanwhile, at the Pentagon, Press Secretary Major General Pat Ryder acknowledged that the Islamic Republic of Iran, via its proxies in Iraq, has resumed attacks against Iraqi military bases housing U.S. service members earlier this week.
On April 22, Iran-maligned militia groups conducted 2 unsuccessful attacks on U.S. forces in Iraq and Syria. These are the first attacks on coalition facilities since February 4th. These attacks put coalition and Iraqi personnel at risk. We call on the government of Iraq to take all necessary steps to ensure the safety of U.S. forces in Iraq and Syria against attacks from these groups. If these attacks continue, we will not hesitate to defend our forces as we have done in the past.
While Iran resumed its attacks against U.S. service members in Iraq, the European Union's member states are stepping up their efforts to confront Tehran's latest aggressions by announcing a list of new sanctions against the Ayatollah regime, a decision which the EU High Representative for Foreign Policy and Security, Josep Borrell, must now oblige to. Thank you for watching TV7 Israel News. I would like to encourage you, pray for the peace of Jerusalem and salvation of Israel. Moreover, if you're blessed by our productions, which are exclusively donation-based, and as such, broadcast free of charge, please consider making a donation. You can do so via our website, www.tv7israelnews.com. I'm Jonathan Hessen, wishing you a Chag Pesach Mevorach V'Sameach, and God willing, we'll see you during our next update. Until then, Shalom from Jerusalem.